Welcome to What the Decks, where over the course of a lunch hour, we take the idea for a deck build from Lunchbox to Deckbox. I'm your host, Skylar, and joining me today is Wellner, the mad scientist that normally joins at the top of every episode in chat, but is instead today joining me here for a very special episode that I am very enthusiastic about today. Wellner, go ahead and say hello.
Well, we'll start with a good day, good day.
I wouldn't expect it to start any other way. So, today's topic is going to be on Fearsome Fortress with Exiled Dead. And this is essentially another episode encouraging you to give Fearsome Fortress a send off in style. We've done the Mad Mop episode, which was my love letter via the Spent Glory series, if you will. And that was the Head Krakas Fort Krakas. So if you haven't checked that out, there's another reason why you should be sending Fearsome Fortress off in style. But here today, we're not here to talk about Mad Mop. We're here to talk about the Exiled Dead, the war band that Wellner insists I keep in the back of my mind at all time. He's the reason I have so many reps against it. He's the reason I can't build anything without considering. He is the, let's say, avatar of the Exiled Dead in our local meta.
One of these days it's going to pay off at a tournament and you're going to thank me.
I enjoy the puzzle of Exiled Dead so much that I enjoy that I have that in my life. So thank you for that. And for those joining us live who experienced the technical difficulties along with us, this is the third time we have tried to launch the episode within the last five or so minutes. So stumbling a little bit over the intro here because what ground are we retreading? What ground are we not? And wanting to make sure that I give Wellner a good entry into the episode today. So on that note, I would like to turn the microphone over to you, give you a chance to introduce yourself, tell people a little bit about how you got into Underworlds and what keeps you coming back.
So yeah, that's the best place to start for that is going to be about last December, late November. Is when I started playing. I had just moved to the Madison area at the time and was looking to get out of the house because I had nothing to do. So Buddy got me into the Song of Ice and Fire tabletop game. Lots of fun, kind of like the old world. Plays like it, but every week or every other week, I'd see you guys playing Underworlds, and I swear I thought it was tabletop 40k, but not 40k. Just because at a distance, some of the death models looked a bit like Necrons. And one day I just decided to ask, hey, what's that game you guys are playing? It looks super interesting. And then the next week I dropped by and it was your league final. Picked up a box of Hexbane's Hunters, and that's a wrap. I've been playing ever since then. I went to Adepticon kind of on a lark, honestly. I just wanted to go to a convention and see what the fuss was all about and play the game. I was having a ton of fun with it. And at the time of going, I'd only been playing for, what's that, April, about 4 months?
Wow, yeah. So Adepticon is March, right?
March, so yeah.
Yeah. Had it really only been 4 months?
It's 4 or 5.
Yeah, wow. And you immediately took the excitement that you found yourself experiencing and shared it with others as well. I think
Yes.
you immediately grew our local with other incredible individuals who I want to shout out as well. That being another Jake, which is why we refer to you as Wellner.
Yep.
So another Jake, Zach, and Jared, all brought in through your mutual love of the previous game, Song of Ice and Fire, and then coming over together into Underworlds. And it's been great seeing each of you out week to week and seeing you grow in the game. Even Zach as well joined us for Adepticon, which was an absolute pleasure. In fact, he goes on to join us in Alberta as well. So we made tournament travelers very quickly out of you.
We like playing the game. What can I say?
Yeah. So today, as we're diving into this and knowing, that Fearsome Fortress is going out the door, it was funny. So when I was considering what I was going to be doing for today's week B session, I received in my notifications a message from Wellner saying, "Hey, if you need something for Tuesday, let me know. I've got some stuff cooked up that you could potentially review on the show." And he sent me a Force of Frost Exiled Dead build. And I ended up responding back with, Google, how do I tell my friend that I can't put Exiled Dead back on the show so quickly?
I then gave you something infinitely worse.
He responded with Godsworn Hunt with
Force of Frost as well.
Force of Frost. Yeah, thank you for that. And so we got to chatting a little bit more about maybe what this week's episode could look like. And he mentioned, that he still wanted to show off the Fearsome Fortress Exiled Dead build a little bit, right? Like, it's still there. It's still loved. If I'm not misunderstood, it's one of, if not your favorite decks with the Exiled Dead.
Yeah, it very much is up there. I can't decide if it's one or two anymore. Masks has taken a hold despite my initial reservations on Masks, but this one will always have a place near and dear to my heart for being, I think, the second or third deck I put together like properly.
Love that. And as soon as you said Fearsome Fortress, I think my response was, "Are you available tomorrow?" And so you took me from, I don't know if I want to do Exiled Dead like so soon again on the show to immediately, well, if we're talking Fearsome Fortress and you're available, I'd love to give people another reason to be playing Fearsome Fortress while we still have it. And I knew right away that if you were available, that was the right answer. And here we are.
Yep.
So let's dive into that. We have two versions of this build to go over today. The initial version that found its way to the top 8 at Adepticon this year. And so that is affectionately referred to as the Fortress of Corpses here. And then you have a slightly updated version called Upon a Fortress of Corpses that will be mostly diving into today. So we'll definitely touch on, what changes have been made and why. Maybe I'm curious if there are, things that over your experience you've just found out that like they are better cards within the pairing or for Exiled Dead in general, or if the meta maybe helped shape these picks. I'm really curious to hear more about that, but getting a little bit of ahead of ourselves there. So as we're going through the episode today, we're going to be giving viewers kind of like a crash course into the Exiled Dead. So I think we'll start there. And as we kind of crash course our way into them, what drew you to the Exiled Dead? And then what drew you to this pairing in particular?
So what drew me to Exiled Dead specifically is how effective they are at doing kind of anything, with the caveat of they can't hold objectives, which is deeply saddening, but fair. And a lot of people who've been playing for a long time are probably going to look at me real funny when I say that, because Exiled Dead inherently don't do a lot of things very good. They don't charge, with one notable exception. They're slow, they're squishy, and they bleed glory. But something I've kind of pieced together over my time playing is that if your opponent doesn't know what you're doing, it doesn't matter. You can just do what you want. And I've been having a lot of fun playing Masks as of late because of that, because it doesn't have a plot card, so I could be doing functionally anything in that first game, and it is a lot of surprise factor until I start laying down my plot card specific card, or my Universal Warband specific cards. But going more in depth into the Warband itself, their deck isn't great. I'll be the first person to admit it. Their objectives are bad. They've got 2 objectives that aren't worth 1, and those that are worth 1, some of them are still really bad to use. Like, have Markov cast a spell for 1 point in the end phase. Why isn't that a surge? Come on, GW, please. But they've got a lot of individual tools that can slot into a lot of places. So building a deck for Exiled Dead is much more of a puzzle, just like playing the Warband is, than it might be for, let's say, Domitans, where you can just kind of slap something on them and call it a day.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. So when we have worked on decks for the Exiled Dead, both on the show and outside of the show, we have found ourselves constantly considering only bringing 5 surges just because of what they have as far as an offering goes. In fact, if I bring up our Gale Force Fighters real quick, which is the last time they've been on the show, that's not the right deck. Oh, okay. Well, you can't right-click your way into a deck in a deck opening.
You can't?
Underworld's DB. No, like, because I was trying to get it to open on another tab for us.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's okay.
But if I remember right, your version of it did only have 5.
Yep, I got it pulled up now. So taking a look at that, we're bringing along Alternating Strikes, Appalling End, and Direct Strike. Those are the only things that we're able to pull in from the Exiled Dead pairing, and frankly, Direct Strike is a bit of a stretch. Like, it was trying to find another surge to include in here.
Yeah, it is definitely okay at best.
And looking at, let's see, both of the builds that we'll be diving further into today, Alternating Strikes and Appalling End, are in fact the only 2 surges that you're bringing from their pool. And I don't think that their pool even has a full, like, 6. I think it's, earlier design.
They have 4.
They have 4. Yeah. So what the other one is Regulus is dead.
Regulus is, yeah, you put a raise counter on Regulus.
Yeah. So definitely rougher on the side of building, and the things that they're asking of you in the end phase as well. And like, you think like, oh, okay, 4 surges. Well, then there's 8 end phase available. There's quite a bit to struggle through with either too little reward or too high of ask.
Yep.
So Exiled Dead have a rough starting point for you in the objective end, and that's something that can hold back a warband in Nemesis as a whole. So what keeps you going with Exiled Dead?
Amusingly, it is that puzzle. So a lot of my philosophy when it comes to deck building, and it's something that I can guarantee you noticed, given you've played against me, all of my decks, I try to build them with a purpose. This goes back to my days playing Magic, where I played lots of combo decks, or more specifically, I had one very specific Knights tribal deck where the entire game was built around Knight Exemplar, for those of you Magic players who know the card. Is it a good card? But I like to go into a game with a plan. So if we pull up the deck, the plan is Conquered Domain. Like that's the plan. And everything else just kind of slots into place if you're keeping that plan of how much can I score off Conquered Domain in mind. Same thing with the Arena deck that I passed your way a while ago. We're going for Reshaped Realm. People are going to die. People are going to take wounds. We're going to get there. Everything else just kind of slots into place considering that plan. So it doesn't matter when I draw that card, just so long as that card appears.
I love that you saw Conquer Domain and thought to yourself, like, how many points can I score off of this? And what is your record
Uh,
when playing
I
Exiled Dead?
haven't gotten to 7. I haven't gotten 7. I've gotten 6 a lot. The closest I came to 7 was playing against Phil after Adepticon. I had a pyramid of bodies, but Markov was dead.
So in the ranks of like deck review on this show, this episode is joining the review of Headcrackers for Crackers and the review of Mornfrost when I brought Force of Frost with the Mornflight to Adepticon to the same tournament actually that this was first featured in. First featured in our local, of course. But the reason I wanted to call that out is all three of them started with some sort of spark. Started with that card that you really want to build around, right? Headcrackers with the fact that they have the early pushes, and then we have Earthworks and Bold Sortie available to us, right? And then Mornfrost was because we had Time Freeze, and when I read Time Freeze, I wanted to like play a warband that would have the most benefit from playing that. The idea of kind of like holding back, biding time, and getting the most out of those guard tokens, that were going to come into play. So here, you say I've got 7 bodies, I've got all of this movement economy, and how can I use that to score Conquer Domain? So I love that these all had key cards that kind of like sparked like a pairing idea, and like you performed quite well with this deck at Adepticon. You perform quite well with this deck all the time. In fact, one of the most fun games I've had to do for like what the decks plays in advance for a field report was against this deck. I played Fearsome Fortress with Loon Court, so the Loon Fort build on the show. And it became like a competition for the middle and trying to knock each other off of feature tokens, and like who's going to score the bigger conquered domain between us and be able to deny some of the scoring opportunities here. But one thing that you have going in spades for you is like the ability to really make Bold Engineer work for you as well.
Yes.
Which,
And Bold Engineer is a critical card. I might even say mulligan worthy.
wait a minute, hold on. Let's see.
It should be in
Card view.
Oh, is it?
Is Bold Engineer not? Oh, so this is why you didn't make it to the finals at Adepticon.
No, Bold Engineer was in the deck.
Oh, was it really?
It was. What happened? Where'd it go?
So this is the.
Why is defensive charges in there? Hold on. That wasn't in the deck.
This is the copy of the deck that is on Battle Mallet. So maybe maybe you ended up accidentally providing them the wrong link.
Perhaps.
When you shared this over to them after the tournament, I was gonna say I thought it was there.
I know it was in the deck because it was in the deck. I played this deck a lot.
Okay.
I played it in the Champs tournament. I'm very aware of what's in this deck.
So let's go ahead and ignore defensive charges there then.
That's Bold Engineer. That's Bold Engineer.
Absolutely. Okay. So is there more that you want to kind of talk about, like why you chose this pairing before we kind of start cruising into like playing this pairing and playing Exiled Dead?
I mean, the why is because at the time we'd just come off of playing in my first local tournament. It was I think it was Q1. And I played Tooth and Claw Exiled Dead, which was fun, but very dicey, and I wanted to play something that wasn't dicey. And so I sat down and I brewed this up to basically say, all right, can I score how much glory without caring what my opponent has to do? And that kind of just was the through line through the deck of I'm playing pseudo hold objective without playing hold objective.
Yeah, the benefit of Fearsome Fortress, in a lot of cases, saying be on a feature token, right, instead
Yep.
of holding an objective. Um, well, cool. So let's dive into. So I have your Fortress of Corpses up, and your Upon a Fortress of Corpses ready, like to tab over to. I think would this be a good time, you think, to like talk about what differs between these two decks?
Yeah. I mean, I can go through the Adepticon version very quickly.
Okay.
It's got some critical flaws in the sense of it doesn't play well against long range warbands, and so that's going to be where a couple of the changes between the two decks come into play. Notably, the Ephraim matchup in the day was terrible. It's still bad, but I think it's a bit more manageable now with the changes. But I hopefully don't have to play that matchup anymore. So who knows? But you'll notice the glory ceiling says 13. That is a lie, in fact, mostly just because Conquer Domain is very silly, and it gives me a shock whenever I look at this deck because it's like, oh god, I built a deck with 13 total glory. What am I doing? In Gambits, for the most part, I stand by them. The only couple changes, cut Necrotic Curse. I've grown against the card in my time playing. And Dance is in there because I like it. I allow myself one meme card, as I like to call them, for every deck, and in this case, it's Dance. And then the upgrades. Lately, I've been running fewer and fewer of the Exiled Dead upgrades, just in my decks, but that's also just because Masks is Masks.
Oh, sure, sure.
But a lot of their upgrades are a bit general, and so having the more specific benefits granted by your pairing can usually be better. But that's the old version. The new version, I noticed, it still has Siege Master in it. Good card, fantastic card, love that card. But I've been toying around with switching it out for Starmaw to give Markov a gun. It's a good change to make.
Really? So Siege Master over something like. So Siege Master is a really interesting cut for me because I see a lot of direct lines from Siege Master to your scoring. So I'm going to take this out of card view for a second here. But it's going to enable like Earthworks, right? Without having to spend an activation going, grabbing yourself a guard token. And it's also going to help hold your positions. So to me, something like Siege Master is going to like secure scoring things like that extra point with Conquered Domain, or let's take a look, like Underground Fortresses, right? Like allowing you to stay on these positions. Um,
Yes, and I'm playing. It's one of those like, it's either Siege Master or Prison of Grief. Is the cut for Starmaw, but see, the reason I was playing around with Siege Master over Prison is because the thing with Siege Master is, yes, it is a direct line, and you don't have to burn the activation for it, but you can score Earthworks off of just Markov existing functionally. He can go on guard, and then Regulus can do a charge. Like, you're not losing an activation. That's one really important detail to remember about Exiled Dead. Markov and Regulus can perform not move and not attack. They can charge, they can guard, they can barge if you want. They are your special forces to the dentist and his boys being your main wall. And a lot of playing Exiled Dead is recognizing when the correct option is to either do a double charge with Markov and Regulus versus, shambling around and repositioning your wall. And on the flip side, a lot of playing against Exiled Dead is knowing how to make both options bad, forcing the suboptimal play.
Gotcha. Um, Looking at your upgrades here, I want to ask, how much is Hardy Scout doing for you? How do you feel about that card in this deck?
it it is quite a good card because it pairs very well with Unfeeling Fortitude, and something that I have found, and something that Zach over on the Path to Glory side of things mentioned, is both of them go very well on Regulus. And by having a second +1 wounds upgrade, it allows you to put one on Regulus as well as Coil, and now you have a 4 wounds Regulus and a 3 wounds Coil. And both of those are much harder beasts to take down because 4 wounds Regulus is, or 3 wounds Regulus is a standard attack and a ping. Now a 4 wounds Regulus requires an investment outside of just a ping card to kill. And Coil being at 3 wounds now means he doesn't just die to like Sarpon uninspired running up to him and hitting him upside the head. Now you have to invest something in him to kill him.
You called Sarpon out specifically there. Sarpon, when adjacent to you, is getting that 3 damage attack, right?
So, when inspired. Uninspired he doesn't, I believe.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. For a moment, I thought maybe the value that you were going to describe with Hardy Scout is how, like, being able to move an additional, or move one of your zombies at a higher movement rate, than the others, like, maybe adds to, like, the versatility of your dances. Maybe makes your dances go a little further. That's actually where I thought you were going to go with it. Would you say that's the case, or is the +1 wound kind of the main benefit here?
I would say the +1 wounds is more valuable than the +1 move because you're slow in and of itself, and the goal of this deck isn't to invade. It's to take your land and stand there and force the opponent to come to you. So having Regulus being able to run around and then provide problems for your opponent to have to solve is more valuable than being able to shamble 1 extra hex, because by the time Hardy Scout is going to be solving that problem for you, you've probably already taken the middle of the board, or have at least positioned to be their next turn. Because, like, you need that Seed Glory, and unless you're getting it off your first activation, and you've positioned really far back with a zombie, which is a thing that you sometimes have to do. We'll get into boards later. You're going to be within 2 dances of the middle of the board anyway, or at least 2 dances away from being in the correct position.
So would you say then that Hardy Scout's main fighter that you're looking to give it to is Regulus? Because then it's like that +1 move to get into enemy territory, be that problem they need to solve, and then while not in your territory, that's when that extra wound is getting put into play there.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, cool. I follow. All right. Well, so let's see. We're getting a little deeper into what specific things work in this pairing and how to apply them. So let's just pull it back one moment so that I can take a look at what cards are different between the 2 decks. Do you know offhand? Let's see.
In objectives, the 2 main changes were cutting mobile resistors for Meat Locker, and then Proud Castellan for Siege Breakers. Shoring up that middle of the line positioning, and then making it so that, especially in Game 2, Game 3, your opponent has to come and interfere with your game plan, as opposed to being able to sit back and then just hold.
All right, so each surviving enemy fighter. So Meat Locker. Interesting. Siege Breakers and Meat Locker are both inviting your enemy to invade you then?
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, go ahead. Tell me more about that. Like, it seems really curious at first.
The reason for that is a lot of what causes Exiled Dead problems is the fact that, you can just sit there and munch away at their zombies over the course of the game. And wanting people to get close and needed to engage forces your opponent to make bad positioning errors sometimes. It depends on how you can position yourself, because 90% of an Exiled Dead player's game is going to be positioning, and making sure that you move to the right spots, and knowing, counting squares and making sure that you aren't putting the wrong person in range of the right person. And so having Meat Locker and Siege Breakers, or at least one of them, to pump up that glory ceiling, is very important in forcing that kind of game plan. Using the example I had from earlier, Ephilim, they just want to sit there, and they want me to come to them. And to an extent, just holding the middle of the line won't work there because I need to have glory to get the cards that I need to reposition all of the tokens into the middle of the board, using Bold Engineer and just walking around. And in order to get that glory, you have to engage with your opponent, because unfortunately, the only objectives that give you your seed glory are going to be Bold Sortie, Appalling End, and Alternating Strikes, because raw materials requires you to have a fighter out of action, so that's not gonna seed glory you. Okay. And Lethal Defenses also does the same thing. It requires you to. It's a kill surge that requires your opponent to come to you. So by inviting my opponent to come to me, it enables other scoring, and it also enables me to get bounty off of my opponent.
All right. So I guess then my follow-up question for you would be, if you have Meat Locker and Conquer Domain in hand, do you ever make a decision to try to go for both, or is that the type of hand where you say, I'm going to spend this round working on Conquer Domain and ignore Meat Locker, or you know what, it actually looks like Meat Locker is more plausible this round, so I'm going to disregard Conquer Domain. That's next round's score. I'm going to go for Meat Locker this round. Like, how does seeing both of those cards in your hand work for you?
It depends on how scoring Meat Locker would interfere with the Conquered Domain. Since Meat Locker is worth 3 and Conquered Domain can hypothetically be worth 7, but let's use 5 as a more accurate number. If scoring Meat Locker would pull 2 points off Conquered Domain, it's not worth going for it, especially if it damages my position. Because then I'm trading inefficient glory values. It's more valuable for me to go for just taking a position and taking a favorable position, and holding that territory, and scoring a high Conquered Domain, especially for the moral victory that happens when you can just say at a tournament setting, I score Conquered Domain for 6.
Moral victory, he says. No doubt. So, taking a look at the end phase changes that you made, what I'm hearing, and kind of picking up as an understanding, is that these are mostly changes that are there to offset your glory bleed and give you a higher ceiling.
Yes.
And then, so I'm gonna guess that that's primary reason, right? And then secondary reason is to invite more interaction for helping score things like lethal defenses, raw materials. So how much do you think that the meta has shaped these decisions, right? Like, going into Adepticon, we're in a world that doesn't have the 10 releases that were all hitched to the 2-week period that was like the Winter Maw launch, right?
Yeah.
So I hear glory bleeding glory ceiling, and I imagine that stays strongly number one reason, as well as, again, the invitation for more interaction. But would you say that anything since Adepticon has kind of shaped these decisions for you?
The prevalence of, if anything, the appearance of Parasite and Rhymeworm's Bite have given me more reason to try other decks, because it's really unfortunate, but the fundamental problem with playing Fearsome Fortress in a post Rhymeworm's Bite world is, while it's not particularly common, the Rhymeworm's Bite is kind of a nightmare matchup, because you're trying to play for territory that they're also trying to play for, in a way that the Fearsome Fortress mirror doesn't cause that problem. I
have found the same, that Fearsome Fortress's biggest enemy in the current meta is Rhymeworm's Bite. It feels it was almost a bit of like sucker punch to be like, okay, I've got 6 more months with Fearsome Fortress, and then to see how much Rhymeworm's Bite can impact, focusing on feature tokens that aren't objectives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as for Parasite, personally, I'm not particularly afraid of that matchup because just Exiled Dead feast on stagger, and since you're bringing the Parasite to me, that just means I get extra damage against you. So that's not a matchup I'm particularly scared of, just in general.
Could,
Um,
could you
I
could
should
you
be most
highlight
likely, but
highlight that for viewers at home? So how does that interaction work?
so the Arc Walkers, Coil, Bolt, Vlash, and Ione all have a fun little keyword called Overload, which gives them +1 damage for their attack action if their target is staggered. And the Parasite just says fighters within 1 hex of this, the fighter who holds the Bane of Heroes, are staggered. Which means if whoever you put that Parasite on is just taking 2 damage or 3 from Coil from all of the Arc Walkers, and I get a reroll. It's really tasty. I had a game where actually the really good memory is when you were testing the Bloodthirsty Hosts. I was playing Masks Exiled Dead, different deck, but the core concept is still the same. You ran Velis forward with the Parasite, and then I just kind of munch on her with 3 zombies in 1 attack action.
Yep, it was brutal. It was not an interaction I had registered until I passed turn to you, and you're like, all right, here we go. So I get +1 damage against your host, and I was just like, say what?
Yep.
With each of my attacks, and I was just like, oh, okay. Duly noted, Exiled Dead love fighting Hungering Parasite, period.
Yep.
Which I think is really fun. So I think what we'll do, we're going to take a break from the differences between the decks, because I think what I should have done was given you a chance to talk a little bit more about how to play, Crash Course, Exiled Dead in general. And I think we're kind of touching on that right now. So, and have, through the conversation regarding the objectives, right? Objectives are important towards how you're going to play them. But if you had like tips and tricks to relay to others and like, hey, I really want to pick them up, what are the fundamentals? Like, what do I need to keep in mind? How would you start somebody down the path of Exiled Dead?
So my first starting point would always be deck building. Deck building is such a massive part of the game, and more specifically Exiled Dead as a core, because of how bad their base deck is. You need to do a lot of work in the pairing department, and you also need to understand that you're going to be feeding your opponent money on a platter. And so when you're building your deck, you need to think about 3 major things. 1, what kind of forcing moves can I make in the deck building stage? Because something I don't hear a lot of people talking about is how your deck interacts with your opponent's decision making. And I would argue, what some people call turn 0 in board placement actually even comes back to turn 0. What do I have in my deck that I know is in my deck that my opponent doesn't know in the first game? And then when it gets to placing boards, placing models, and all of that fun stuff, all of that for you is relatively dictated, at least in this pairing. You know where you need your things to be, and you know where you need to place your fighters. Ione is always going to be a dangle bro because Ione doesn't have any keywords outside of Overload. Coil is very important because he's your only source of 3 damage outside of Markov once he gets inspired. And Bolt and Vlash are tech pieces, as I like to call them, for my MTG days. With Vlash having knockback and Bolt having cleave, they're useful pieces to put in the right position based on where your opponent is placing. And so a lot of your initial decisions before you even start rolling dice and moving models is, once I reveal this card to my opponent, what is it going to make him do in a tournament setting? And where do I need to put my models to get them into the correct position to accomplish my game plan?
Yeah, so when you're placing your models, you're going to be filling up the board, uh, this is a seven fighter warband. So the reality is there isn't a choice in which starting hex you're going to leave behind. It's rather instead the order of which you're going to fill them and who is going to occupy which spots. So when you're playing Exiled Dead in general, and let me know if it changes for Fearsome Fortress. Like add that in here. Like, are there any like staple placements for you where it's like these are common things that you'll do at the beginning of any game regarding your placements?
Yeah, so generally my first placement is always going to be Ione right to the front. So using a couple example boards, good boards to pick are going to be ones that have on both sides or on all sides realistically, but on most relevantly, the long sides, um, only one interfering hex. And when I say an interfering hex, I mean a hazard hex or a starting hex. And the reason that's important for Fearsome Fortress is because you need to have as much in those territory in within one hex of no man's land as possible. Especially for Conquer Domain and just your scoring in general. And so being able to place as much in that territory saves you moves with whoever you slap Bold Engineer on. So boards like Glacial Tomb and the Ice Swirl Maw is pretty okay if you're placing boards.
So Glacial Tomb, and you said Ice Swarm Maw?
Ice Swirl Maw. It's the
Yep.
cover hex, stagger hex, lethal hex.
Yep.
And then the Glacial Graveyard is pretty decent. In a post Parasite world, it's less good because it places stagger hexes. Same with Ice Swirl Maw. But any board that has one thing on a edge is a good board for you. Because I don't think there is a board that doesn't have something on a line.
Well,
excluding the short sides.
Yeah, no, I follow. I almost said the Glacial Graveyard, but no, the Glacial Graveyard does have one. So the idea here is you're getting squared up boards, right? So do you win at the beginning of a game? If you win roll off, are you hoping to manipulate boards or are you hoping to manipulate objectives?
In an optimal world, you manipulate objectives. However, when you place the Fearsome Fortress plot card down, your opponent is going to know what your game plan is. And so, realistically, you're not going to get more than two things in no man's territory. So you have to decide whether you want that third thing that isn't going to be in no man's territory, or near no man's territory, to be in your hands, or if you don't care whether it's in your opponent's hands. And that becomes a matchup call. If you're playing against aggro, you're going to want to manipulate the board so that you can offset the boards. You're already not going to be getting three things in no man's territory without moving them, so making it harder for your opponent to get to you is more relevant. If you're playing against something like Sepulchral, give them boards. They're not going to max off. Realistically, they're not going to max offset you, and if they do, they're also making mistakes because they also want stuff in good positions to hold.
A common strategy against Fearsome Fortress, you see that plot card. You have chosen or been presented with board arrangement, right?
Yes.
So commonly you'll see an opponent either long board you because that creates only two spaces in no one's territory directly, and then the max offset is quite a popular call there as well. So do you find that this pairing struggles into that call by your opponent, and how do you overcome that?
I don't find that it struggles with it. It's just a factor that you have to consider. And I don't find it being a real problem because, again, Bold Engineer is just mulligan worthy. That is such an important card to have turn 1, turn 2 out, that if you're mulliganing for it, that is just the correct thing to do. Because Bold Engineer says, I don't care where these go. Yes, this objective back in the back of my territory, I'm just going to drag that forward over the course of this game.
Yeah, the fact that it's after a friendly fighter's activation. I'm actually just going to read it in whole here for people. So +2 move, except during a charge action. So yes, whoever's receiving this also is going to have the ability to go further during a dance if you select, a zombie there. But the other piece of this is reaction after a friendly fighter's activation. Pick one feature token in an empty hex adjacent to this fighter. Place that feature token in this fighter's hex. So you're getting that decision after any activation. So what the zombies are uniquely able to do here is Diantelos is the one that's activating, right? That's the friendly fighter that's activating. And so a zombie can move with Bold Engineer adjacent to a feature token and then move it with this. And if Wellner is able to push, one of these zombies and then take a turn with, say, Regulus or Markov and Regulus combo, it again doesn't matter, which friendly fighter is taking the activations. So all of a sudden, Bold Engineer is seeing use anytime this fighter isn't already on a feature token.
Which is huge because, as I mentioned when you were building Breakneck Slaughter, that after a friendly activation is a very important text because it's not after this fighter's activation.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the tips and tricks that I think that we can highlight for individuals out there is be wary of cards that say, what is it? After this or for this fighter's next activation, stuff like that, because very often the fighter that's going to be receiving it is Diantelos or Markov. So anytime you're taking a card that's going to benefit for an activation, for a specific activation, either before or after, take a second look at it and think to yourself, can this actually extend to the zombies that are moving during the activation, or is this going to be isolated to my movers, to Diantelos and to Markov? Well, cool. So we've gone. Is there anything more that you want to talk about when it comes to the boards and placements? In general, whether those placements are the objective tokens, feature tokens, or the fighters themselves. I have one more note myself that I think I can jump in with. But first, anything over on your side?
Not that I can think of realistically at all. Exiled Dead are a unique puzzle in that a lot of their decisions kind of get made for them, and it's a lot about trying to make your opponent make the right decision.
Absolutely. So the note that popped into mind is when you're longboarded, does that increase the likelihood that Meat Locker is going to score for you?
I've found that it generally makes it harder, mostly because what'll end up happening is, since you have to start further back, you have to spend more time walking forward, which just gives your opponent more time to waddle one dude across the line.
Sure.
And that's the real problem with Meat Locker. It's why I always have to hem and haw over putting it in a deck, but I don't really have other options for good high scoring cards, especially in things like Fearsome Fortress or things or other similar decks.
So
it's one of those.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's one of those necessary evils that you kind of have to consider and have in there, mostly because even if you don't score it, it acts as a forcing move, as I'm gonna coin, by simply saying, "I have this in my deck. You have to play around it now."
Sure, along with Siege Breakers as well, there, for sure. Yep. Okay, so if I'm starting out, I'm playing Exiled Dead, and I want to give this puzzle a try. Do you think that you'd recommend this objective package for learning this pairing and practice, getting to know this puzzle? Or do you think that you would recommend instead your Adepticon package with mobile resistors and Proud Castellan? I can never pronounce it. I know I have that pronunciation wrong.
So I would almost always recommend this new variation of it over the Adepticon pairing, mostly because of actually those two objectives. Mobile resistors forces your positioning, which is something you don't want to do any more than you already have to. Having versatility in positioning is very important. Same thing for Proud Castellan, because Proud Castellan requires, I believe, you to hold an objective with your leader within one hex of no man's territory, yes. Which means you're putting Diantelos very close to the enemy territory and in in a lot of danger for 1 point. And Walking Wall doesn't help you score it.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Um, I love seeing Walking Wall in here. I know that this is in here for um, well, for those who haven't tried out Walking Wall, it is phenomenal for helping you score your objectives. That's what it's in here for. There's also some really fun tricks that can play off of it, but overall, like I'm sure that that's been a part of being able to grab a 6 point conquered domain
Oh yeah,
between hauling like activation after activation, hauling tokens in. And I've seen you just pull all of the feature tokens from your side of the map, and sometimes even just over the fearsome fortress territory, right from their side, and just kind of squeeze them all straight into the middle and slowly pull them together over the course of a game with something like Bold Engineer, because you have the benefit of knowing that if your engineer dies, you can bring him
he
back.
just comes back.
And frankly, you probably love that because you get a little bit of say over where that fighter is going to spawn.
Yes.
And then after they spawn, you've just finished the friendly activation, and so boom. All right, I'm also going to pull a feature feature token underneath my fighter.
Oh, that's actually another really really good point, because there's a couple cards in here that are specifically to enable weird things like that. Specifically, Terrible Dynamism and Powered Command, being out of sequence resurrections. Terrible Dynamism is in there mostly to counteract scything. Scything is very scary, very frightening. Please keep it away from me. I do not like it. But Powered Command is a really fun card that I don't know if people recognize as how good it really is. Because after your opponent's attack action that killed one of your fighters, you get to immediately, basically, instead of removing that fighter off the board, you can place them in any hex adjacent to the person who killed them. So if Ephilim decides, you know what, Coil, I do not like you, you suddenly have a Coil right next to Ephilim. Or, same thing for Leona or Domatan. Like, the ability to just warp across the board after your opponent's attack is huge. And you can use that in conjunction with Bold Engineer to now have your Bold Engineer fighter A next to an opponent. Sure, uninspired, but who cares? You're generally putting Bold Engineer on Ion, and if Ion isn't already uninspired, weird things have happened in that game. But you're going to have your Bold Engineer fighter near opponent's feature tokens just start dragging them back to the center of the board, and it's a really juicy card that I have a lot of fun with.
Excellent. Well, so one of the things during this episode that I want to be mindful of is, so we started the episode early today because I wanted to do this special episode with you, and so we only have you for a limited amount of time. So we have roughly 15 minutes before we have to wrap up. So knowing that, let's see what else we kind of want to focus on highlighting. For sure, I want to I think it's really valuable to hear, through play testing, through shifts in the meta and through experience, these card choices have shifted. I think that that's super valuable to be able to say, that card's out, this card's in, and here's why. So let's take an additional look at any cards that have changed between the decks. So I'm seeing that between the two decks here, you have dropped a spell. Oh, Necrotic Curse.
Yep.
And are there any other changes to the gambits?
Outside of cutting Necrotic Curse, which I think was to put back in Gnarlwood Tusks, because it does virtually the same. It accomplishes the same thing, but without the risk of A, dice, or B, damage to your spellcasters. The goal of Necrotic Curse is to get that stagger token out. 1 damage is nice and all, but you're trading damage, and it's not a good card. I will stand by that statement.
Sure.
Um,
I know how you feel about Necrotic Curse, and how much ire you have for Ephelum,
it
uh,
makes me mad.
who has just a better version. Um, so eyeing up the differences here, it looks like Gnarlwood Tusks is at least in both the build that you submitted today, upon a Fortress of Corpses, as well as the one that was submitted to Battle Mallet for Adepticon 24. Um, so
Oh,
the difference I'm
then
seeing,
it's redeploy.
yes, is there you go. So um, tell us a little bit about Redeploy.
So redeploy, as has been covered before, is a fantastic card because you can target your walking wall fighter and then basically just push them for hexes, which is really helpful for getting the dentist out of getting Dentalos, sorry, habit, out of dangerous situations without needing to move him, which means you can instead attack with him. Um, and also just getting fighters who are on feature tokens onto different feature tokens that are in fortress territory. So if you waddle Markov onto a rear objective and then push him 4 hexes into no man's territory, you now have a Markov that doesn't have to charge and can just stand there and attack.
Yeah, yeah, and so this is also a trade off in utility. So getting rid of Necrotic Curse, you're using Necrotic Curse primarily for dealing damage, I would assume, as well as then obviously having the stagger potential as you talked about with Gnarlwood Tusks. So with something like Necrotic Curse, your hope is that the utility you're receiving from that is hastening the removal of an opposing fighter, where but it does cost you 1 damage to the caster, and that cast
Potentially 2 in a bad world.
potentially 2 in a bad world.
Backlash.
Oh, backlash. I see. Indeed, indeed. So I know, through our discussions, it's one of the reasons that Necrotic Curse has made its way out is just because the trade-off proposal is too much to take on. Like you need to treat those 4 wounds on Diantelos like as preciously as possible, and especially in the current state of the meta, like you don't want to assist the like a quick end to
Yeah.
Diantelos. So you're trading out, the potential to hasten the removal of an enemy fighter instead for like movement tricks, positioning tricks that are going to enable a lot more of your scoring than getting a kill surge, or getting a kill bounty, and whatever comes from that. Maybe it was a priority target, or what have
Yeah.
you. And I really like this call. I think redeploy, with what you've got going from a scoring standpoint, makes a lot of sense, and it can probably really save you on like Meat Locker too. Like
Yes.
knowing that you have this in here, being able to launch a fighter that is out of position, that isn't going to help score Meat Locker, 4 hexes out of your territory, and into a position to actually assist it. Like there, there are countless reasons why redeploy works so well here, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic card. I'm upset that I slept on it in Adepticon, but I don't think it would have changed the outcome.
So then, taking a look at your upgrades, I think they are exactly the same outside of this extremely weird defensive charge that you stand by.
Yeah, upgrades haven't changed. In my more recent playtesting, I've been playing around with a couple changes. Most notably being trying to figure out a way to cut Prison of Grief. Just because the only way you're going to really get value out of it is going to be most likely putting it onto Dantalos, which is already putting a bigger target on his head. And like my thought process, and what a lot of people are confused by when I talk about why I just say put everything on Dantalos, is because in the circumstances when you're going to be losing the game, you've already lost him. Fighting uphill after losing Diantelos is a very tall ask, and it is a very difficult thing to do. So making it so that he has a massive target on his head makes it so that your opponent's decisions are much more consistent. It's a lot about mind games. Knowing what your opponent is going to do and when is half the battle.
Absolutely. Well, and so you're considering bringing Starma into the deck, right? And so
Yes.
I think Prison of Grief, like trading that out for Starmaw, is a pretty fair swap, because so Prison of Grief is playing on your opponent's positioning, as you were describing, and hoping for that spell cast. And if this is on Markov, then your odds aren't great. It's 50-50 that this is going to work out for you, unless you're testing on my side for Gale Force fighters. Then it's going to go off every time.
I'm still upset by that. I was sitting next to you playing that game.
But jokes aside, like Starmaw is also stagger tech, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you've broadened your threat range on somebody like Markov from 1 to 4, and enabled him to take repeated activations, because he's not having to charge to add to the damage equation. I do really like this potential swap.
Yeah, and the other big detail about Starmaw is it makes it so that Markov can support Regulus without needing to charge or barge. He can just stand there, and then Regulus can poke a dude into him.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that being said, everyone heard him say it. He said barge. I think one of the tech chips that we're sleeping on here is that this is a warband where you do really want to think about barging when you're playing, especially with Markov and Regulus, right? Because not only is what that looks like, right? You puppeteer, and then you move with Markov, very likely, and with a barge, and so you're staggering your opponent, you're staggering yourself, and then your attack. Now, on Regulus's turn, you have a support, you have a reroll. Like, the chances are really good that this attack is getting through, and by doing this, then you have opportunity to do future puppeteers, because you haven't charged, therefore you can continue to activate Markov.
And the other really important detail, sorry for jumping in, Markov's Inspire condition being when Regulus successfully hits a person, means that by barging you're making it more likely to inspire Markov, which then means you're going to have 2 damage spiking to 3 on the crackback if they don't move.
Ooh, real good. I think the only thing to keep in mind there, because I think that's a solid play and a good tip, is you can't then charge with Markov, correct?
Correct.
Will you puppeteer later?
You can still puppeteer, but you cannot charge with him unless you can somehow remove that move token. And the same thing goes for Regulus, which is why I don't think barging with Regulus is almost ever the right call, because you do virtually the same thing, but just by attacking.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's a really cool duo. Being able to constantly oppress a charge on top of something else that you're doing with Markov. So like being able to just constantly say Regulus is charging, and I'm getting a bonus activation, and for that to potentially be a range 4 shot, I think is really good. In fact, I want to ask you, how strongly do you feel about this? Can we fit Starmaw into your Fortress build while we're here today?
I mean, yeah, no, I definitely think that is a solid replacement. Especially since you and I discussed this repeatedly. I don't like the 2 glory end phase for casting 3 spells. So cutting Prison of Grief, which isn't really doing much outside of Stagger Tech, to replace it with Stagger Tech that is doing things is probably the right call, and I think that is the right play.
Added, excellent. Save upon a Fortress of Corpses. Excellent. So this will be the version of the deck that makes it over to Battle Mallet. Cool. Well, let's see. What else can we cover in the short remaining time that we have together? So just taking a look at the questions I prepared for us. Yeah, we've done a good job of covering through what I wanted to do in our limited time. So I'm going to open the floor up to you. Tell me anything more that you'd like to about this pairing with Exiled Dead, and hype people up. Get them ready to get out there and give this puzzle a go before they no longer can.
Honestly, if there is one thing that I can recommend this pairing for, it is making you think about the game in a different way. Playing Exiled Dead is a very interesting and different way of playing, and I think it is a very important step that everyone should take. There was a discussion that was being had a while ago in the Mortal Realms Discord, where someone asked, "What do you think a good warband that teaches the fundamentals of Underworlds is?" And I replied with, and this is going to be a controversial opinion, I genuinely think Exiled Dead is a very good point. You need to have a amount of experience to play them properly, but what they teach you is, in my opinion, core Underworlds. You need to know where to stand, why you're standing there, and what cards are in your deck. And sure, they do it in a bass-ackwards, pardon my French, way, but they do it because they must. Knowing how to play Exiled Dead, while not directly translatable to playing something like GSP or Ephilim or Domatan or even Sepulchral, because Sepulchral do everything Exiled Dead does, but differently. They resolve the game of Underworlds in their unique manner. But I really think it is almost core Underworlds. You don't need to play around objectives because you can't really hold them. You're just throwing dice, so you need to know where you need to stand to throw those dice, and you have to think about support, positioning, keeping your leader safe, and inspire conditions, because getting Markov and Dentalos inspired is an important part of the puzzle.
And what to do when your key pieces fall.
Yes, that is a very, very important thing, and you have complimented me on my ability to play from behind without the dentist or Markov before, and I appreciate the compliment, but it is such a hard thing to do. That keeping them safe is always first and foremost in your mind.
Yeah, I think a lot of fundamentals can be gleaned through experience with the Exiled Dead, and it definitely will force the way that you think about all of the positions that you're maintaining, and it will make you a faster player because you have a lot to do. And so if you get used to playing Exiled Dead and you slim down to a warband that isn't activating 5 fighters at a time on the regular, you're going to be able to breeze through those decisions because you put a lot of work into them when trying to pilot Exiled Dead. But I do have to caution, this is, in my opinion, not Baby's first warband.
Oh God, no. This is definitely not Baby's first warband. This is I would say maybe Baby's third or second warband. Once you've got literally the core of Underworlds understood, how to move, what is an activation, what is in my deck. Once you understand the basics of Underworlds, you can then take a step up to what are the basics of competitive Underworlds, which are 2 separate steps. And I think going from step 1 to step 2, a good step to take would be playing 5 games as Exiled Dead, or even 2.
Yeah, I think so as well. And something, it's also good to be on the other side of Exiled Dead at some point, and to play both sides. And the reason I'm saying that is because when you're playing Exiled Dead, you're thinking to yourself, like, almost like a Rube Goldberg machine. Like, how do I make this work? And like you can be racking through the decisions on your side. However, what you don't respect or realize in that moment is how much your opponent is also trying to process how to play against this swarm of fighters that are resurrecting, moving all at once, attacking all at once, and can pinball your fighters through drive back, through knockback, built in on one of our tech piece zombies. There is so much to think about on the other side of the table, and how do I get to Deantelos, that when you're in the driver's seat for Exiled Dead, you can forget what it feels like to be up against it. And so I think having a relationship with both sides of the table with Exiled Dead does do a lot to teach you different aspects of the game.
very much agree. Um, I do not say this lightly, but like Exiled Dead are hands down probably my favorite warband in Underworlds, and it's because of the amount of different things that can be done and the amount of thinking that goes into playing them over the course of a game. And I just love the brain burn that they give when trying to pilot them at a very high level. Do I think they're the most competitive warband? No. Do I think they can be with the right deck? Yes. Do I think they're almost there? I'd give them a solid B plus.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if they had more objective offerings that were attractive to them, that would help.
Yep.
Especially
GW. Please make Markov cast a spell of Surge. I beg you.
Especially offerings that can help offset the glory bleed, right? Whether that's in the reliability of the surge or the end phase, just to be able to like kind of count on like when I see this card, it'll help make up the seed glory with ease. Or sorry, not seed glory, the glory bleed.
The glory bleed.
Yeah, like at a low value. But a lot of times with a warband like this, it's the glory bleed at a high value that you're trying to overcome, and so like that's two things that are working against them, and probably holding them back from A tier, especially at a time like this, where like ping is prevalent enough where you can kind of you can find yourself through abilities and power cards just trimming zombies down while also taking your activations against them. But that kind of sounds like dissuasion from playing them. So let's not end on that note.
Interestingly, for those of you who do not like the Rhymeworm's Bite pairing, I actually think Exiled Dead is uniquely able to deal with it, because since you move two fighters at once, at a minimum, you're always going to be providing at least two targets to the Rhymeworm's Bite player, so you're not going to get double pinged on the same fighter unless you are letting them do that to you.
There you go. So you have found that the Exiled Dead match into Rhymeworm's Bite isn't too difficult.
It's more tolerable.
Okay. And I would say like the worst version of that encounter is unfortunately this Fearsome Fortress deck, right? Like if you're up against that pairing, do you just pivot to aggro and you just press into them and take them down?
That's actually why I keep Dance in the deck, because then you can almost treat Dance as mulligan worthy, and then the tempo swing of hitting Dance in the first turn is massive, and you can just blitz across the board and then suddenly be in your opponent's face and say, "Hi, I'm in your territory against three of your fighters. You have to answer this right now."
Excellent. Well, I hope we have given the viewers plenty of things to think about and reason to give this a try. We're going to wrap up right now so that we can get you on your way. But thank you a ton for being able to join me today. I don't have my notes up during our technical difficulties. I had to pull a lot of things down. So I'm going to be winging the outro here. And so as I'm winging it, first, again, thank you so much for joining us, Wellner. And thank you for being a part of my local and for like it. I don't necessarily want to take too much time here to gush about the local that I have, but you're a part of what makes my local so great, and I can't thank all of the people that make up our local enough for being such great people, both people and players, right? I think we have just such a great community, and I have you and everyone that you've brought in, and to thank for that. Like, you are such a positive force there. So okay, I promise I wouldn't gush. So but
it's an honor and a pleasure to have been here on the podcast. Thank you for bringing me on. But it's an honor to be considered in such high regard as a part of the local, and I want to thank you specifically for getting me into this game. If I hadn't asked what's that game you guys are playing, I wouldn't be here. And thank you for giving it such a good pitch, and I thank you specifically for getting me into Exiled Dead, because you can blame yourself for this puzzle.
Oh, right. Okay, here's how to get into the episode to let the world know that with our local, we have a donation bin of warbands, and when new people enter our local, after we've seen them, come back. So usually you'll have people kind of try the game out, and if it's for them, you'll see them come back. If it's piqued their interest enough to see them return, we'll have them pick out a warband from the donation bin, and Wellner's pickup was Exiled Dead. It's just been Exiled Dead since then, in the best way.
Oops, all exiled dead. My unpainted models look at me longingly from the other room.
Oh yeah, no, and what, you have 3 sets of Exiled Dead at this point?
Yeah, I've got one set unassembled because I wanted a spare deck. I've got one set assembled and primed. I need to paint them. I was planning on painting them like Michael Jackson's Thriller eventually. It's gonna be good. And then I have the set that I took to Adepticon, which are battle worn, battle bruised, and very played.
Beautiful. All right. Well, so to wrap the show here, what we're going to do is we're going to let you know that Upon a Fortress of Corpses is going to be available on the Battle Mallet Nemesis library, as well as in the show notes here. Alongside Fortress of Corpses, Wellner and I will be contacting the Battle Mallet to let them know that defensive charges should not have made the list. Big whoopsies there.
I even got deck checked at Adepticon. It was not defensive charges. It was definitely Bold Engineer.
Yeah, no worries. I'm sure it's just like a version of the deck that ended up getting passed over to them. But you'll see the proper version of Fortress of Corpses updated there. So you'll see that under their tournament section. If you clicked on Adepticon 24, that would be a fast way to get to this deck. Otherwise, just search for Exiled Dead. You'll see both decks featured there, as well as any of the decks that are built here on the show are always passed on to Battle Mallet. I'm very appreciative that they are interested in hosting the decks on the show. And I am working behind the scenes to update all of the decks that we've done so far that we've created on the show with the field reports in mind. And so stay tuned. Those will be updated, and the new versions uploaded, they'll overwrite the current version. So I'll let everybody know that once we get that going, that the field report versions of the decks will be up on Battle Mallet. So if you'd like to talk to Wellner or myself, you can find us both in the comment section down below. He's one of the many individuals that have taken to the comment sections on these videos. I know he watches them. Or if you want to reach us directly, then you can also reach us on the Mortal Realms Discord. And the mortalrealms.com webpage has a link to our Discord there. All right, we're going to wrap it up. So thank you again for watching. I hope to see you next week. Thank you, Wellner, for joining. This has been What the Decks. I've been Skylar, and
Oh, good day. I didn't realize that was a tee up. I'm sorry, I'm bad.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Good day.